My guest today is Sharon Dunlevy, an educational advocate with a heart for children in foster care. She works to make sure their educational needs are recognized and supported, training foster parents on the laws that help these children succeed in school and beyond. Sharon also uses her voice on bigger stages, recently winning fan favorite in a speaking competition for her message on the power of education to change lives. Hi, I'm Abby Dominguez. This is Heart to Heart with Abba Gaba podcast, and I'm so glad you're here. I spent over a decade as a nanny and teacher, learning from children and families around the world. Now I bring those lessons to you, heart to heart conversations with people from all walks of life, sharing stories of love, laughter, and resilience that remind us of the power of connection and community. Subscribe today and join our village of heart to heart listeners. Sharon, thank you so much for being here today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
You are so welcome. And I am conversing with you from Mesa, Arizona. I would love for my listeners to know where I am connecting with you from.
I'm in the Indianapolis area in Indiana.
Nice. I have never been there, but it's
It's a
nice
nice
to.
city. It's a
Oh,
great city for raising families, especially.
oh, nice. Well, we are very happy to have you here today. The work you do really highlights something we don't talk about enough. The challenges children in foster care face just trying to succeed in school. I'd love to start by asking, what first led you into this work as an advocate?
So my background is in special education, and I did that for a while. I was a children's minister for a while, jumped around from some different jobs, and decided I wanted to go back into special education. So I was looking for some positions, and a job came open for a uh, educational advocate for children in foster care for a licensing agency in Indianapolis. And so I applied because I knew the special education laws and I knew trauma would cause like developmental delays and all of that, and got the position and just found my passion, right? Like
Mhm.
it was amazing that all the things that I learned, the foster parents that I worked with, the kids that I worked with, and then after I was under a grant, and after that grant ran out, and then COVID hit shortly after that, I decided that I needed to expand what I was doing because most states do not have educational advocates for foster kids. And
Oh,
so I train foster parents to be those educational advocates
I love
so
it.
that if no matter who's in their home, they're able to advocate for their needs.
Oh, I that just warms my heart. I know that in my life at some point I was thinking about fostering. I used to work in a Head Start program, and we have
Mhm.
so I learned about fostering, and I really at some point wanted to. So thank you so very much for the work you do, and thank you so much for being here and training parents to and arming them with resources to know what to do and help our families and our children. I wanted to ask you, what factors lead to positive educational outcomes for students in foster care? And then I'll come back to my next question.
Sure. So biggest uh, the biggest thing that foster kids need in order to have positive educational outcomes is to have school stability. So in the past, whenever a kid would change homes, they would change schools.
Oh,
And then in 2016, when Every Student Succeeds Act replaced No Child Left Behind, they had put in some specific provisions for children in foster care to allow them to stay in what's called their school of origin, whatever school they were in
wow.
when they changed homes, even if it's out of district. And that the school districts have to provide transportation for them to that school that's out of district. And so that allows the kids not to change schools over and
Yeah.
over and over again.
Yeah.
The other thing is, if they do have to change schools, Every Student Succeeds Act, or what we call ESSA, allows them to be enrolled immediately into the new
Mhm.
school, even if paperwork is missing. So in the
Mhm.
past, again, if the child or the foster parent didn't have the child's shot records or their social security card or whatever, they were not allowed to enroll them. Well, if you're in the world of foster care, you know records do not always follow the kids very quickly. And
Mhm.
so being able to immediately enroll them into a new school and have them start right away reduces that amount of time that they're out of the classroom. And that really is what's important. Our kids learn best when they're in the classroom. And so when they're out of the classroom because of having to wait for transportation to a school or because they can't get enrolled, and they're already missing classroom time because of therapy appointments and court dates and things like that, everything works against them, and then they don't have good outcomes. So those two provisions from Every Student Succeeds Act has really made a difference in helping kids stay in those classrooms, have some stability, have a sense of belonging, and be able to have some positive educational outcomes.
Oh, I just love that. And I was going to ask you, I'm so glad that there was a change in place because having them change schools every time they move, that would be so a loss, like losing I mean, not family, like people that become family and then having to change. That would have been, I can't even imagine. I'm so glad that there is a
Yeah,
new shift in place to help ground them, help them be more successful in with
yeah,
life because they're already going through so
exactly.
much. And let's throw this at them, like, oh my goodness.
Hmm.
Um, I wanted to know, are there any success stories that stand out, moments where you've seen things work out with this
Yeah.
process?
When I was working with that licensing agency, a lot of what I had to do was negotiate those laws with the schools. And what I found was once the schools kind of understood what was going on, and I had started in like 2017. So 2016 was when the law was enacted. And so
Hmm.
they were still very new. And so a lot of them were still learning about the Every Student Succeeds Act and what those
Right.
changes were. But as I was working with them and as they were learning about the process and how to make this happen, I found that the kids were much more comfortable because they weren't changing those, schools all the time. They weren't leaving
Yeah,
friends behind. And, one of the things that we forget about foster kids is that they don't have a lot of choices in their lives.
they
They didn't
don't.
choose to be removed from their home. They didn't
Right.
choose which family they go to.
Oh,
And
yes.
so when they would be moved around, they didn't get to choose what school they went to. And
Right.
now they have a little bit of empowerment in terms of choosing what school they get to attend. And it
Yeah.
really does make a big difference for these kids. And so what I found was, yes, they were happier. They were a lot of them, you mentioned feeling like family. Well, sometimes they're separated from their siblings, and that school is the only place where they get to see their
Oh,
siblings. So
yeah.
now they still had that connection. The other thing is if these kids are on what's called a reunification plan, where the goal is to reunify them with their biological family, then it doesn't make sense to have them move schools and
Hmm.
then be reunified and change schools again. And
Yeah.
so it really, that stability and that
That
sense of
stability.
safety that
Yes.
comes really is important. And I have seen personally how that has helped the kids do well or do better in school than they would have if they were continually moving.
Because kids need stability and that
Yeah.
knowing what to expect, what's going to happen, what's going to
Yeah.
come, some positive predictability. Otherwise, it's just so
Yeah.
chaotic and all that.
Yes.
So I wanted to ask, how can communities, not just schools, help support those outcomes?
Yeah. So, communities can do a lot. One is, um, foster care, like kids in foster care, you're not going to necessarily know their names or things, but
Right.
you can contact the school and say, do you have any students that need tutoring?
Oh,
Do
okay.
you have students that need extra support in terms of, I mean, foster parents don't get a lot of money to take
Hmm.
care of these kids.
Hmm.
And so, like, their clothing allowance is really low and things like that. So, donating items to the schools,
Hmm.
donating school supplies,
I like that.
paying for a field trip.
Hmm.
You don't have to, as a community member, you don't have to know who you're supporting.
Oh,
You
yeah.
can just support
Just
somebody,
support.
right?
Yeah.
You
Yes.
let the school choose who's supporting. And so you're going to catch those foster kids that way. The other things the communities can do is foster parents need safe places where they can meet together
Hmm.
and support each other, and or where they can do family visits with biofamily. And so community centers, whether it's a religious center or just a community center, the library, any of those opening their doors to be that safe place
Yes.
can be really, really helpful. And making it known that you're there specifically to support foster kids and foster parents without having to be too intrusive, but
Yeah.
just opening your doors for them and letting them have a safe place where they can come and feel welcome and connect with others who are struggling with the same things they're struggling with.
I love that because it takes a village.
Hmm.
So I love that. So, how can foster parents advocate for the educational needs of students in their care?
Yes, so the biggest thing is to know the laws, and that's really what I teach. I teach classes on those education laws. I've got a couple of contracts with states that I teach for their foster parents, and I'm always looking for more contracts. So I'm hoping to get into, most of the states if I could,
Hmm.
in terms of making sure that they are teaching them those educational laws. The other thing is just being really aware and not afraid to ask for help.
Hmm.
So, one of the other laws that I teach is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, because a lot of times trauma physically
Hmm.
causes the brain to shrink, which causes
Oh,
developmental delays, but
yeah.
it also causes behavioral issues, which tend to lead to suspensions, expulsions, being sent to the principal, again, getting the kids out of the classroom, and then they're not learning.
Right.
So, being willing to ask the school, can my kid get an IEP, an individualized education plan? Or if they can't get that, can they get a 504 plan, which is a behavioral plan that would help keep the kids in school? And if the school's not willing to do that, are there still accommodations you can make? So my own biological child, it's probably on the spectrum, but at the time, that was 20 years ago, we couldn't get them diagnosed. And so I would work individually with the teachers and say, okay, this particular type of assignment, like we had, I think it was fourth grade, they would get a writing prompt, and they were called night writes, and they would get this writing prompt, and then the next morning they'd have to turn in the writing. Well, that was too much for my kid. It just could
Yeah.
not. There were tears, it was very,
Oh,
very stressful. So I talked with the teacher and I said, I know they don't have an IEP, but is there any way I can get the prompt 2 or 3 days ahead of time
yeah.
so we can work on it over and over, or can we have an extra 2 or 3 days to turn in the assignment?
Right.
And so teachers are willing to do that if you ask for that help.
You ask for help. Yeah.
So that is really the biggest thing, is being willing to learn those rules, learn those laws, but also ask for help, and really reminding the schools that, this is all about the kid. This is about, my kid succeeding, and
Hmm.
working with them positively so that the kid is able to achieve.
I love that. Speaking of parents advocating for foster children and asking for help, asking for support, What are some of the key rights foster parents might not even know they have?
Yeah. So first, that Every Student Succeeds Act, where the kids can stay in the school with transportation or be immediately enrolled. There's a lot that don't know that. There are a lot that don't know that trauma behaviors can be qualify for a individual education plan, an IEP or 504 under what's called other health impairments. There is not a trauma category, but there's kind of that other health impairments miscellaneous category that covers things like PTSD, oppositional defiant disorder, reactive attachment disorder, all of conduct disorder, all of those, as well as any depressive or anxiety disorders. So all of those can be covered under that other and health impairment. So a lot of times they'll think, well, they don't have a developmental delay, they have trauma, but you can get an IEP for that if you advocate for it. The other thing that a lot of foster parents don't know is that when a child turns 14 in foster care,
Yeah.
the state is required to be working with that child to create a transition plan for when they become adults.
Hmm.
And so they should be working with their case managers on perfecting and learning independent living skills. Because again, if they are in foster care, they don't have a parent to fall back on like our kids
Right.
do.
Hmm.
And so we want them to be ready to leave foster care with a college or a career. And they don't, a lot of foster parents don't know, one, that they can get those resources starting at the age of 14. They don't know that there is money available for things like college, vocational training, incentives to keep your kids in school.
Hmm.
There's also money available as they start aging out that they can have help with room and board and transportation, getting their driver's license, all of those things. And they also can stay and care, depending on the state. Every state does this a little differently, but they can stay and care anywhere from up to the age of 21 to 26, just
Hmm.
depending on your state. So
Okay.
now it's not like it used to be where a kid would turn 18 and then they could still be in high school and they would be booted out of foster care and then they couldn't
Oh,
graduate. So
oh,
that doesn't have to happen anymore.
oh, good.
So there are options. So it's really important to know what your state's transitional services look like. And if you just go into whatever your state foster care website and say transition services or older youth or aging out, any of those, they should have uh, programs in place that are
Mhm.
supporting the kids so that they age out easily and ready to live on their own.
I love that. I love that they can arm them with like, prepare them because sometimes it can be
Yeah,
uncertain in a foster child's life. And so arming
yeah,
them with education and preparing them to be in the real world and have the skills to survive and succeed. I
yeah.
cannot say that enough. And I know we mentioned trauma. I want to ask to everybody listening that doesn't know this, I want to ask, what is trauma-informed care? And how can
Mhm.
school staff be better trained in applying it?
Yeah, so trauma-informed care is a way of rethinking how we respond to children's behaviors.
Okay, I
In the
love it.
past, if a child was acting out, we would say something about, either the child was bad or their behavior was bad. Either
Mhm.
way, we're calling somebody bad.
Right.
And what we have learned, and this is not just with foster kids, all of our kids are exposed to trauma-inducing events always because of social media
Yeah.
and the fact that, if there's a school shooting, they know about it right away. And
Yeah.
so there's all that potential. And so trauma-informed care switches that script. And what we start asking is instead of, what's wrong with that child, we ask
Mhm.
the question, what is that child trying to say? So behavior is communication. And that is
Mhm.
something we always say over and over again. So when we're in a school, and we see behaviors, especially from kids in foster care, a lot of times teachers really worry about teaching kids in foster care because they've heard those horror stories about the
Yeah.
behaviors. But it's trying and it takes time, and that's hard because I know a teacher has, 30, 40 kids in their classroom,
Mhm.
and they're all having some type of behavior, and it can be overwhelming. And so, the biggest thing the schools need to do is support our teachers better. And
Yeah.
that's a societal thing, right? We've got
Yeah.
to pour more money into our school systems. We've got to support these teachers. We're asking them to do too much with too little.
Yeah.
But overall, just understanding that a child, when they're behaving the way they are, they're communicating a need.
I
And
mean,
so then it
yeah.
is our job to interpret what that need is, and then how
Mhm.
can we help them meet that need. So in the past, we would use a lot of punishment type behavior management tools, isolating them, sending them to the principal, taking away something.
Oh,
A lot of schools will take away recess for kids who behave badly, and yet recess is probably what they need the most. So we've got to change that
yeah.
rather than having exclusionary and punitive
Hmm.
things. We need to move more towards trauma-informed practices
Yeah.
like restoration. If a child acts out, there is a consequence. The consequence is they need to restore the relationship that they broke with their teacher or another student. And so you work collaboratively to figure out how are they going to restore that relationship. The other thing would be instead of exclusionary, you're going to do inclusionary. So
Hmm.
we talk about time ins instead of time outs.
Love it.
So a time in would be the kid has to sit next to you at their at your desk and work because they can't sit with their classmates without being distracting. That would be a time in
Time in.
type of discipline consequence. And so it just flips those scripts a little bit in terms of understanding the child with trauma because those exclusionary practices are going to trigger more
More.
behaviors rather
Yeah.
than less.
Done less. Yeah.
Mhm.
Sharon, you are fabulous at what you do. You hear, and I want to ask you this, speaking of trauma, are there common misconceptions about trauma-informed care that you often have to clarify?
Yeah, the biggest misconception is that trauma-informed care means that kids get away with bad behavior.
Oh,
And that is not the truth, right? I mean, like I said, it's a difference between discipline, which is teaching appropriate behavior, and
right.
punishment, which is penalizing.
Mm,
And we've really, the whole 80s, 90s zero tolerance policies, all of those were very penalizing focused.
mm,
And those were not appropriate or effective. And
yeah.
so now we need to move more towards this discipline where we're helping the kids learn to manage their own emotions, manage their own behaviors by working with them in
Mhm.
order to learn new ways of behaving and new ways of communicating. Because if behavior is
Yeah,
communication,
it is.
what's a different way they can express the need they have? And that is
Mhm.
on us as adults to train them. The hardest part is, and this is another thing that I think is a misconception, is a lot of times disciplining a child is as much about our own reactions and
Right.
managing our own behaviors and
Hmm.
emotions
Hmm.
as it is working with the kid and their behaviors and emotions. So a lot of times when I am teaching foster parents, I remind them that you can't change your kid, but you
Right.
can change how you respond to
How
your
you
kid.
respond to your kid. I love it.
Yeah.
Um, what was it? I had a thought. Oh my goodness. I'm listening to you. I'm so like listening deeply. I forgot my question. Oh my God.
That's okay. Happens all the time. I talk a lot.
No, this is really good stuff. Oh, I was gonna say that some children don't really know if they have behaviors that disrupt, if they've been in homes and
Yeah.
through what
They
they've
don't
been
have,
through, some don't know. They don't have the consistency, and some really
yep,
don't know. And so
they
by
don't. They
yeah,
were not, they weren't, they didn't have those behaviors modeled appropriately.
right. That's the
And
word. Yes, thanks.
And that that is not just, again, it's not just kids in foster care, right? This is
Right. Children, yes.
overarching.
Right. Mhm.
And one of the biggest, there's two big areas that I see us lacking in our society right now. One is appropriate conflict resolution.
Mhm.
We as a society do not model conflict resolution very well. And a lot of that has to do with that anyone who is grown up in like the 70s, 80s, or from the 80s and before, we were always told, don't talk about money, politics, or religion at the dinner table. Well,
Right.
that was to stop disagreements. Well, because we didn't talk about them and we didn't disagree, we never learned how to disagree
Agree. Right.
appropriately.
Right. I
And so
see.
we don't know how to model conflict resolution for our kids.
Mhm.
And so we have to do some real work
Mm.
on learning ourselves. How do we, resolve conflicts in an appropriate way? The other thing that I think we're not modeling well in this society is compassion and empathy. Those have
Compassion,
become
empathy.
bad words, right? That it's weak. It's, that's where the term snowflake came from. And there's this sense that if we use those words, it means that we're allowing bad things to happen and all this. And yet what we're seeing is that we're the individualistic out for ourselves has become kind of the norm. And then what cracks me up about it is that the ones who complain about these, kids today, they always say, kids today only think of themselves, kids today. And I think, well, who taught them that? You did. I mean, how any parent out there that has ever had to drop their kid off or pick them up at the school is going to understand what I'm saying when I say that that is like the worst thing ever, because those parents are the worst drivers ever, because they want to get their kid right up to the door. Heaven forbid they should walk in the rain for 2 minutes, or all of those types of things, and they don't model to their kids appropriate ways. So like waiting in line. I've seen parents, we've had to have like our vice principal have to stand in the second lane so that nobody tries and goes around cars, because they've already dropped their kid off and they want to zip out of the parking lot, but there's a kid sitting on that side of the road, and they're trying to get out of that car and they're going to get hit.
Oh no.
They don't, we're not modeling thinking about
Mhm.
others' needs. We're
Mhm.
only thinking about our individual needs and our family
Yeah.
needs. And we've got to open our minds and help our kids see that compassion, that empathy. How do we look at other people through their eyes and what their experiences are, instead of just focusing on what we think is right and appropriate?
Right. I really feel like with seeing behavior in children, if we have the resources to help them be successful, then it's a win for us and for them.
Yes.
And they can teach others, or for
Yeah.
life, they can help themselves, they can help others, and they can become a new person that is good,
Yeah.
that is a force for good. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
wow.
and isn't that what our legacy should be? Somebody asked me on a different podcast what I think my legacy is. And I thought about it, and it's my kid, because now they're 23 and they live, pretty much their own life, and but they're a leader in their community. And
Nice.
and that is something that I feel very proud about, because
Nice.
from an early age. They were volunteering with us when we would do volunteer
Oh.
work. They participated with us when I mean they would come with me when I teach sometimes, you know. I
Hmm.
mean it's how we raised her,
Oh,
and it's a great thing, and I'm very happy with who they are and what they contribute, and I feel like, that's a legacy I can be proud of.
that is wonderful. And that's where the modeling comes in,
Yes.
naturally serving. And that's just wonderful. I wanted to ask, what advice would you give to a new foster parent who feels intimidated by,
Don't be afraid to ask for help. I
okay.
think one of the things that happens is foster parents live in a fishbowl. They've got a lot of eyes on them. People are
Mhm,
coming in and out of the house. They've got therapists, you got the school staff, and there's always this kind of fear that if I act like I don't know what I'm doing, they're going to
mhm.
take my kids away or they're
Oh
going to
no.
take away my license. But from our perspective, working in a licensing agency and working with foster parents, I would rather you ask for help
Hmm.
and admit when you don't know something, because then I know you care, than the
Yes.
ones who just blindly go along and think, well, I'll just figure it out. And maybe you're doing it wrong, you know? So don't be afraid to ask for help. You don't have to do it alone. And
Yeah.
that's hard, but it really is. If you can think of yourself as a member of a team raising this kid, or like you said, it takes a village. It doesn't have to just be them. And I'd say
Mhm.
that to any parent, right? Every parent has struggles with their kids.
Yes.
And so every parent should feel comfortable asking for help when you need it. And it's not weakness, it's strength. It is strength to admit that you're vulnerable and that you need some help.
Yeah, it's better to ask for help and get all the resources, all the help you can
Yeah,
get, than just to like walk into it by yourself. But because it's really huge. It's a huge undertaking,
it
and
is. Being a parent is
it's
terrifying.
terrifying. And so I can't even
Yes.
imagine not asking for help and asking for support. Like that would be,
Yeah.
that's not, doesn't do anybody good, the
No.
parents or the child. So
No. And it should always be about the child, right?
it should be
If
about the
we
child. Yeah.
It should always be about the needs of that child, and not our ego, not our pride.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my gosh. I want to go back to the school system.
Hmm.
What steps should states take to help increase graduation rates and passing assessment scores for students in foster care?
So, the steps that could be taken is providing those extra supports like tutoring for foster kids.
Mhm,
Depending on your state, like here in Indiana, we have a budget for tutoring services. So if a foster parent needs tutoring for their kids, they can call their case manager. The case manager writes up a referral, they get that tutoring. But I also teach for Ohio, and they don't have the same system.
mhm,
So things like tutoring, helping schools learn the laws. A lot of times the schools don't know the laws. Like I said, every Student Succeed Act was put into place in 2016, but there are still a lot of schools I talk with, and they still think that foster kids fall under what's called McKinney-Vento, which is for homeless kids, which is
Oh
completely
no.
different. So, it's keeping up on that. And what happens is we forget that kids or that teachers have trained over the years. So you could have a teacher that's teaching now that trained 30 years ago. And depending on how their district is with providing professional development, they may or may not learn about any new changes.
Mhm.
So we need to standardize having professional development around trauma and trauma-informed care. And not just again for foster kids, but for all kids.
For all
Um,
kids, yeah.
yeah, differing learning needs. I mean, we're seeing so many different ways of learning now, and ideally we would overhaul the whole system, but that's not going to happen. But we can start implementing some things. You know, I wish I wish if I had a magic wand, I would take away state assessments and figure out a different way of measuring
Hmm.
learning, like through projects, those types of things. Those are the only things I remember from school are the projects I
Hmm.
worked on. I don't remember the tests that I took.
Hmm.
But if you're going to have those state assessments, allow for some flexibility. You're going to have kids who, like me, I was able to do them quickly because I tended to just pick an answer and stick with it. But if you've got overthinkers in your classroom, then they're going to get stressed. So allowing for extra time, less stress around it, making them not so high stakes. Like here, if they don't pass the third grade reading test, then supposedly they're not supposed to move on to fourth grade. I think they changed that, but they tried that for a couple of years and that was
Hmm.
horrible
Oh my.
because, the kids knew that this was going to happen and then they stressed out even more and they did even worse on the tests.
Oh.
So we've got to, if we're going to assess them that way, we've got to take away that pressure. We've got to be a little bit more accommodating. We need to really identify and help kids learn the way they learn best. And some of that also means that states need to be putting more money in. Like I said, we need more aides in the classroom because one teacher is not going to be able to teach all learning styles. But if they
Yes.
can have an aide or two, that's what we did when I was growing up. You had an aide or two, and the
Hmm.
aides would take, whichever group, and maybe they were more math focused and they would do a math
Hmm.
project, whereas more, reading focused. Well, you said that you did Head Start, and I ran a
Yes.
preschool. Isn't that how we do preschool? It's all about
Hmm.
centers, right?
Hmm.
Kids who really like to learn by drawing, they went to the drawing center to learn
Yes.
their ABCs.
Hmm.
The kids who like to learn by building, they went to the block center and they
Yes.
would do their ABCs.
Right.
We should be doing that continually throughout, especially through elementary school. And I think, we would see that gradual reduction of the stress that school causes right now and more of that sense of school. I mean, I loved going to school. School was not a stressful place for me.
Hmm.
And now I feel like it's very stressful for
It
most
is.
kids. And
Yeah.
that's not what it should be.
It shouldn't be that way. Sharon, thank you so much for joining me today. This conversation has been powerful. Thank you so much for joining me today and for sharing your passion and insight about improving educational outcomes for children in foster care. Your dedication to empowering foster parents and advocating for systemic change is truly inspiring. Before we wrap up, do you have any final thoughts to share with us? And do you have any website, anything that you want us to know and to follow you? And Zoom says we have 1 minute, but we can crush it. Let's do it.
Okay. Yes. So my business name is Foster Care Training Today. And if you Google that or go to www.fostercaretrainingtoday.com, you can find more about me and how you can partner with me, come to up to trainings that I offer, all of that there.
Wonderful. To our listeners, thank you for tuning in to Heart with Abagaba. I hope Sharon's message reminds you that every child deserves a fair chance to learn, grow, and succeed. If you enjoyed this conversation, please share it with someone who cares deeply about children and education. And don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss our next Heart to Heart. Until next time, keep celebrating children and those who care for them. Thank you for sharing this space with us on Heart to Heart with Abba Gaba. I hope this conversation inspired you to keep moving forward in hope and light. If this episode spoke to you, please share it with someone you love. Leave us a review and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a moment of inspiration, connection, and joy. May your home be filled with peace, your heart with joy, and your spirit with the quiet strength of love. Until next time, take care of your heart, take care of each other, and keep celebrating the love that makes us family.